Now on BBC News, a global, topical, weekly show that lifts the hood on the entertainment and news business, exploring the companies and personalities who command our attention and how our perception of the world is shaped by them. The Media Show.
Hello, I'm Katie Razzle, and coming up on The Media Show, we're taking a look at President Trump's trade war, how journalists can help us understand what's going on, and what tariffs might mean for the media industry itself. And the Indian Premier League is back. We're learning how a cricket contest has become one of the world's most valuable sporting events by drawing inspiration from Bollywood and the NFL. It's all coming up on The Media Show. Donald Trump's tariffs have been dominating the headlines ever since his so-called Liberation Day on April the 2nd. To help us understand the media's role in what's going on, I spoke to Darshini David, the BBC's deputy economics editor.
I've got to say, I've worked in this industry, I've covered this area for, let's say, decades, to be polite, and I've never known anything like this. This is not the financial crisis. This is not COVID. This is a whole, the rule book has been ripped up. And I think this is true of most newsrooms, is that, we've all seen quite difficult times. So when you get a massive story like this, there is stretched and there is, quite frankly, wondering what we're missing, because you just cannot keep up with what's coming out minute by minute and all the various developments, and trying to explain to people what on earth is going on with bond markets and why they should care, for example.
Absolutely. And so let's go back to last Wednesday when Donald Trump announced these tariffs.
So if you look at that, China, first row, China, 67%, that's tariffs.
When you were watching that, did that feel, it looked like he was approaching it very much as a media event.
Yes, it felt like with that sort of scorecard, that game show, whatever you want to call it, game show, the horse racing odds, whatever you want to call it, it was almost a made-for-TV event, wasn't it, when you saw that coming out? But behind that was this incredibly serious message that if you were a factory making trainers in Vietnam, or if you're a household in America planning how your budget is going to stretch, things were going to change pretty rapidly and pretty drastically. So you've got to somehow get over, this isn't just numbers on a scorecard, this is people's lives and livelihoods and how we're all interconnected. Quite frankly, President Trump, when it comes to telling that story, has done some of the heavy lifting for us. But I think that sense of disbelief that we all had when we saw that was replaced very rapidly of how on earth do we impress on people, not just the severity of the story, but also the huge uncertainties around it, because we just don't know really how this is going to play out.
And what do you think his media strategy has been when it comes to promoting these ideas, explaining the tariffs?
It's been very fascinating, hasn't it? Because, when you hear from the president, when you hear from those behind his plans, behind the scenes too, you get that very strong message. We have been taken advantage of, right? We have made things, the world has come and taken them, they've taken the jobs, and now we get the goods, and this is not good enough. And he's played that game of trying to put forward a very simple, straightforward message, but one that really resonates with a lot of people. What you don't hear that much of course, is the opposite effect and how this is going to impact on prices. And there's been a reluctance to engage with that. And then it's been almost behind closed doors. There was a point this week, I've lost track of days, but there was a point at which we didn't hear from him all day. I think it was Monday. We didn't hear from him until the evening when he suddenly popped up with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu from Israel. And the whole day, the markets had been sliding. But apparently that is quite deliberate, because he thinks, sit back now, let the others come to me. I've got to be seen as unshakable.
Interesting. And obviously, economics it's always complicated to explain, but tariffs are particularly complex. In your job, it's your job to communicate these ideas and these complicated ideas to people. Have you managed to come up with an explanation of tariffs that we all understand? I hope you have, because you've been doing it for a few days now.
Well, look, tariffs, to be quite honest with you, tariffs are not difficult. Tariffs
For you say they're not difficult.
Well, I say they're not difficult. They are difficult, as I say, if you're somebody who has to work, well, you're one of those agents who has to calculate exactly how much more has to be paid, because it differs by good to good in a lot of countries, and it can be frightfully complicated in that sense. But for the rest of us, quite frankly, this is an extra tax that is applied to goods entering the country, and it is the body that is importing them that is liable for that extra tax, right? That's as simple as it gets. So it's not the person who's making and selling the goods who actually pay it, so to speak. It's the person or the company importing it directly. And along that chain, there's a lot of different moving parts. The company that makes it, is it going to try and suck up some of those extra costs, sort of offset them somehow so that they don't risk getting lower sales? Or is the consumer at the other end going to pick up the full bill? So that's frankly all it is.
You should do this for a living, maybe.
Do you think so? Have I passed the test?
Yeah. But of course, what is more complicated, I suppose, is working out the impact, but also in this incredibly volatile environment. I mean, for you, I'm thinking of last week's story, for example, where, it was started by a bot putting out a tweet saying the White House was going to roll back on tariffs. That was then picked up by CNBC. The fallout was trillions of dollars of trading on the back of it, and it wasn't true. Just how do you sift? What was your reaction to that, and how do you sift through all this information?
Well, this has become a story where we are having to react second by second. And just to give you an example, you mentioned those new set of tariffs that China's imposing on America. I found out about those from a floor manager in a studio where I was sitting, right? And
how does that work?
How does that work? That floor manager said, have you heard this? This has just popped up. At which point you're saying, right, I'm going to have to double check it, which, to be quite honest with you, hasn't always been the case when these kind of stories are up. But as you say, when we have things in this world of social media, when you have developments like the one we saw on Monday, they call it the 15 minutes of madness, when we had that report that tariffs are being paused. And then we all had to go and look at the original clip and go, actually, that's not what that person said at all. And then the markets realised pretty much at the same time, and you saw in real time them going back down again. So everything takes double checking.
The clue's in the title of our programme, The Media Show. And I do want to bring in Max Goldbart, international TV co-editor at Deadline. Hello, Max.
Hi.
Just give us a sense then, will you, when it comes to the media sector, do we know what kind of an impact tariffs will have on the sector, on the media?
Indeed, yeah, it's still playing out. So it's been about a week or so, obviously, since the big tariff liberation day, and there is still some confusion around what the real main impact will be. For starters, there was good news in the sense that the tariffs are clearly on goods, not services. So this was a big question marks the day prior to Liberation Day were being asked to me.
And explain why that's good for the media if it's not services.
Indeed. So services would be a TV show or a movie, for example. So there was a little bit of a fear around the fact that you might be selling a TV show or a film into the States and have a tariff slapped on that, which was a concern. That may still arise in the reverse. There's obviously these discussions around the European Union applying potential tariffs on services in the other way around. So that could be a big problem that could come further down the line. But in the interim, as Darshini has been reporting, I'm sure in great depth, any industry is weakened by the current situation.
And there has also been an immediate reaction for some companies. So I'm thinking about the fact that Nintendo's delayed pre-orders of the Switch 2 in the US, but also that the TikTok ban deadline has been extended. Just to explain the impact, because there was talk, wasn't there, that actually that was related to tariffs, the fact that Donald Trump has extended the deadline for offers and a sale.
Indeed, yeah. TikTok has become this sort of unlikely battleground between the States and China, hasn't it, this year, in a way that nobody might have expected if we were speaking about a year ago. So there was a very brief time when TikTok was banned in the States for a few days in January. And then it was reinstated as Donald Trump attempted to push that ban further down the road in order for a deal to be struck so that ByteDance, which is the Chinese owner and former of TikTok, could sell a majority of TikTok's assets to either a US company or a company outside of China. That was slowly being negotiated. But the tariffs, and I'm sure as we're speaking, probably the tariffs between the States and China have gone up again, like even during these past 10 minutes. That has left that deal completely under threat. So Donald Trump has now pushed it back by a further 75 days, I believe. And TikTok remains this kind of interesting battleground. Donald Trump seems not opposed in many senses to TikTok. He likes the idea of people being able to generate their own content and whatnot. You see it on...
He's good at it.
Indeed. You see it on his Truth Social platform. And I think there is a part of him that really wants it to be able to continue. But then when China comes into the mix, it is this complicated relationship that they have. So we'll have to see how that goes from here.
Now to one of the biggest sporting events in the world, the Indian Premier League. This year's contest has got underway, and with player auctions and Bollywood owners, it has become a huge media event. The latest set of TV rights were reportedly sold for more than $6 billion. To tell me more, I was joined by Tim Wigmore, Deputy Cricket Correspondent at The Telegraph.
So it's like a 2-month competition every year, played between Indian cities who all have teams. There's 10 teams, and yeah, it's played in T20 format. The sort of takes 3.5 hours, and you switch on every night, 7:30 Indian time, and you'll have a game for you. And it's very much aimed on. It's kind of, as you said, it kind of copies the American model of fusing entertainment with sport.
And it was founded in 2008. Why, at that point, did they found it?
I think ultimately the growth of the middle class in India meant there was a huge untapped market for cricket. And international cricket was very popular in India, but there's a limit to how much international cricket you can play. Just the team can't play every day. Whereas, you might get the national team playing, a dozen games in a month. In the IPL, you can have 40 games in a month or whatever. So there was a real huge untapped market. And they decided, people don't really watch domestic cricket in India, but why not kind of copy the American model, what we get in Premier League football, get people to root for Mumbai or Bangalore or whatever. And they found, lo and behold, there was this huge market for the game, and suddenly people are cheering for cities, and they're cheering for India in a kind of separate way as well. But it's sort of a nation v nation competition where India always wins, which is ideal.
Was there a socio-economic context around its funding in terms of sort of massive rise in TV and smartphone ownership? Was this the key moment?
Well, they've actually tried to make a similar tournament in 1996, and it didn't quite get the funding. Possibly that was a missed opportunity. But I think by 2008, the Indian economy was doing a lot better, and the TV rights for cricket generally were rocketing. And I think, India had a feeling that, all these cricket, about 3/4 of cricket's revenue comes from Indian fans. And I think the Indian board felt, this money is going to cricket around the world. But if we have our own competition that's really great and has all the best players coming from abroad, that we'll be able to keep that money for ourselves. And it kind of it worked perfectly from that point of view.
And Bollywood's involved. Can you just explain how it's helped with the popularity?
Well, a series of actors, Shah Rukh Khan is one, have been involved in the ownership groups of teams. And, if you watch a game, the cameras obviously between overs often are panning to them in the crowd. So there is that real that link between Bollywood and cricket. But I would say as the league has evolved, that link's become less important, because it was a sort of way, the Bollywood connection was a way to encourage people to watch initially. But now, as those tribal loyalties have developed, you don't need the gimmicks quite as much, because the sport is selling itself, really.
And call me old-fashioned, but when it comes to sort of English cricket, I think of it more as sport and less entertainment. But is that not the case for the IPL? Is that very much packaged as entertainment?
Yeah, I mean, they borrowed a lot from America. They had cheerleaders and stuff, even who came from NFL teams. So the package kind of came from America. And now you talked about England. Well, now the 100 in England, the tournament has 3 teams now who have private investment from the same owners who run the teams in India. So you actually have, now that is coming to England as well via India. So it's kind of gone from America to India and now to England, which is that's the sort of how the networks have worked.
Tim, stay with us, but I do want to bring in Tymal Mills, England T20 international, also a former IPL player. And Tymal, you're also a BBC commentator, so I'm sorry we've dragged you away from commentating on the ongoing Gujarat Titans v Rajasthan Royals match. Can you take a little break from that?
Yeah, happy to be here. Always happy to take a little break when one's available.
Great. Well, we're giving you a break. Just outline for us then, how would you describe the level of media scrutiny that you were under when you were playing there and compared with here?
So yeah, it's heightened, certainly. I remember, so I guess my first introduction to it wasn't through the IPL, but it was when just prior to the IPL auction, I toured with England in India. We played a 3-match T20 series, and ahead of the first game, I was called for a press conference, pre-match or pre-series press conference. And at that time, I had one England cap. I was very naive, very wet behind the ears. I think I was only 23 years old, maybe just turned 2024. And yeah, I was sat down in this room at the stadium in Kanpur, I think it was, and yeah, it was a room full of, I don't know, maybe 70 people, maybe television cameras everywhere. You're being asked questions that you wouldn't get asked anywhere in the world. There is a real kind of free for all in terms of
What, as in personal
media.
questions, or
yeah,
what?
personal or cricket questions. A lot of the time you'll find that and it still happens now. Tim will agree, and will have been in these rooms. The Indian media are searching for clips and for snippets and particularly about Indian players. So you'll often find that we'll be doing an interview after a game that I've played really well in, but a member of the Indian media will just ask me a question about Virat Kohli or something that's completely unrelated to the game that I've just played in or I'm going to play in, because they know if they can just write an article on Virat Kohli, MS Dhoni, or one of these huge names, it will just do huge numbers for them. And it's very unique. That wouldn't happen in England, in another sport.
And you just mentioned the auctions. Just tell me, because I said at the top, they have these player auctions, but what are they? What is that? What goes on?
Yeah, so they're huge. They're 2-day events often. So again, we won't have time to really go into the full dynamics of an IPL auction, but that's how the teams are built up essentially. So every year you can release players and bring players back in, but it goes through an auction process.
But it's a huge media moment.
Oh, it's huge. Yeah, it's televised around the world, and it is a physical auction. So each team has a table in the room. There is an auctioneer. I went to India about literally 3 weeks before the auction, and I did really well for England against India in India, and that was preceding the big IPL auction for that year, and it was a perfect storm moment for me in terms of I did really well. It was televised, obviously broadcast, and then there were a few teams that needed a fast bowler like myself, and yeah, then I was in Dubai at the time, and I sat in my bedroom and watched as I went under the gavel on television.
Okay. And now you've made that pivot to becoming a commentator. Is it a help and a hindrance that you know players personally and you know what they're going through? What's the experience of making that jump between a player and a commentator like?
Yeah, absolutely. You can give insight. I think ultimately you have to come back to always trying to remember why you're there, because there are so many commentators and presenters and analysts. But ultimately, the thing that I can offer is that insight into a changing room. And I'm still a current player. I still hope to keep playing for a while longer yet. But it can be difficult trying to be honest and give criticism of players that you're friends with or that you're currently playing with. Or I've certainly had quite a few instances where I've been trying to get back into the England team and I've been commentating on an England game, and you're reticent to obviously say bad things about them when you're trying to get back into that team, aren't you? So I think my England days might be behind me now, so maybe I can be a bit more confident in what I say. But ultimately, you need to tell the truth. That's where it kind of you stand and fall with. You need to be able to articulate what you see and be fair and give insight and give analysis into what you see from a player's point of view.
Now, Mark Zuckerberg has dubbed him the Taylor Swift of tech.
Welcome to GTC!
Jensen Huang is the founder of Nvidia. That's the company that makes the chips to power AI. It's valued at more than $2 trillion. But what do we know of the man himself? Stephen Witt has just written a biography of Huang. It's called The Thinking Machine, and he told me the story.
Yeah, so Jensen was born in Taiwan, moved to Thailand when he was young, and then came to the United States when he was 10. His parents sent him to what they thought was a prestigious college preparatory school, which turned out to be a reform school for juvenile delinquents. So he shows up to the place, and the grounds are covered in cigarette butts. And his roommate has knife wounds from a recent knife fight he's been in.
Are we
So
saying
Jensen's-
sorry to interrupt, are we saying that they sent him there on purpose, or they didn't know either?
They didn't understand what
Okay.
this place was.
Okay, good.
They got it confused.
That would be
They
bad
thought it was
parenting.
college prep. Well, he was alone. So he kind of thrived in this environment, believe it or not, and became kind of a leader there. Came back and
Is that where he came
yeah.
across computing?
No, he was reunited with his parents in Portland a couple years later and came across the Apple II in the 1970s and became obsessed kind of with computing, majored in electrical engineering. At this time, there were no computer science kind of majors typically. And so he studied it from the circuits upward rather than the screen downwards, which is the way we would usually approach it now. Became a skilled microchip designer, did so on paper, and basically has done this ever since he was 20 years old. I mean, he's still doing it. He's 62 years old now.
And why then did he found Nvidia originally? What happened? What's the backstory?
Originally, they were trying to make money off video games. So they saw, the 3D graphics controllers that we like play in Call of Duty or whatever. They wanted to render that as fast as possible, and they saw a market for a certain kind of customer who would install these cards and these chips in their computers, almost like hot rodders with engines and cars. They would build a whole computer just around this microchip. So that became a very successful industry, but Jensen was kind of terrified that they would, be competed away, and he was constantly looking for another application for the circuits. And they finally found it with AI a few years later.
Yeah, I was going to say, when did he decide to dedicate the company to developing AI chips? Because clearly that was a eureka moment.
Yeah, so they had noticed that the demand for 3D graphics was infinite, right? No matter how well you rendered the characters in the game, the gamers always wanted more and better graphics. And they were constantly looking for another application that had that same profile. And finally, they discovered artificial intelligence. No matter how smart they made the computer, no matter how smart it became or what it could do, the users and customers just demanded more and more and more. And so this was a perfect fit to them. They pivoted the company to almost full-time AI in 2014. And at this time, AI basically was not on anyone's radar. So it was a very early bet. And then when kind of all of these AI breakthroughs came along, the company increased in value several hundred times, ultimately becoming in 2023 the single most valuable company in the world.
Well, Stephen, I'm going to pause you there for a second because I think it would be useful to hear Jensen Huang discussing what AI can do for us. Let's have a listen.
If there's one thing that I would encourage everybody to do is to go get yourself an AI tutor right away. And that AI tutor could, of course, just teach you things, anything you like, help you program, help you write, help you analyze, help you think, help you reason. All of those things is going to really make you feel empowered. I think that's going to be our future. We're going to become superhumans, not because we're going to become superhumans because we have super AIs.
Well, that was Jensen Huang speaking to Cleo Abram on her YouTube channel. Stephen, what is his vision then for our AI future? We're going to become superhumans with AI, but what specifically does he mean?
Yeah, we're going to become sorcerers. I mean, we're just going to talk into the computer, and then our actions will be manifested in the real world by AI agents and robots. And Jensen's trying to position himself right in the middle of all of that. He's training brains for robots right now to deploy into real world bodies. It's like science fiction, except it's all real. And Jensen doesn't even read science fiction. He's just building this stuff from the circuits up. So he's kind of connecting with these visions of reality that science fiction authors have had for a long time, but he's doing it just from like pure business, pure logic almost.
And has he ever talked about ethical or safety debates around AI? Does he have any concerns?
Not at all. Actually, he gets upset when you bring it up. He thinks that these concerns aren't driven by data, that they're irrational, and that they're just kind of these dystopian science fiction visions that aren't realistic, that they're not going to occur. Of everyone I talk to in AI, he's the most purely optimistic about the future. He really thinks we're entering what he calls a new industrial revolution, where data goes into his AI factories and intelligence comes out. He sounds like Thomas Edison sometimes.
Okay. And how dependent are the big AI companies on Nvidia's chips? And what impact do you think that has on Huang's relationship with the likes of Sam Altman and Mark Zuckerberg?
They're 100% dependent. He's the most powerful man in AI. He's essentially the only vendor of the hardware. During the gold rush, he's the guy selling the shovels. All the other companies, OpenAI has tons of competition. Meta, Google, Facebook, all of that, Jensen functionally has almost no competition at all. He controls 80 to 90% of the market for the most advanced chips. So,
and a lot of their production, a lot of Nvidia's production takes place in Taiwan, which is obviously very vulnerable to geopolitical changes, from Trump's tariffs to threats from China. We were talking about tariffs at the top of the program, but how does he navigate those? Is he a savvy political operator?
He never talks about politics. He was actually the highest profile Silicon Valley entrepreneur not to attend Trump's inauguration. But this has a tremendous impact on it because everything Nvidia kind of sells is manufactured in Taiwan, and they have dozens of Taiwanese kind of suppliers. So this Nvidia stock price is down quite significantly over the past few weeks as this kind of shakes out.
And you clearly know the guy very well. You've written a biography about him. You've interviewed him multiple times. What insights did you get into him and his relationship with the media? What was it like interviewing him compared with others, for example?
Tough, but in some ways great. He's very candid. He doesn't have some message he's trying to get across. He's kind of thinking out loud, but he's also quite elusive. He really does not like to talk about himself at all. The thing I observed about Jensen is most Silicon Valley executives I've talked to are pretty clearly driven by ego. Jensen is not. In fact, almost the opposite. He beats himself up constantly. He's constantly kind of looking in the mirror and telling himself he's not good enough and that he has to try harder. And this is what motivates him. It's almost purely negative emotions. He's terrified of Nvidia going bankrupt. Even today, even when they're the largest company in the world, he's totally terrified that some kind of competitor is going to show up and destroy his company. So he operates in a way that I would describe as almost a little neurotic, but it seems to work for him.
That's all we've got time for this week. Thank you so much for your company. Goodbye. And if you'd like to hear a longer version of today's show, search BBC The Media Show wherever you get your BBC podcasts.